Welcome to the Jack Hopkins Show podcast, where stories about the power of focus and resilience are revealed by the people who live those stories. And now, the host of the Jack Hopkins Show podcast, Jack Hopkins.
Andrea, one of the things I've been really dying to talk to you about is the Butler rally, Trump rally, where Donald Trump was allegedly shot by a...
Is the key term there.
Right. Now, one of the attractive things about having you on is I knew you had been an ER physician. And while I have nothing even approaching that kind of experience, I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, and I also did some nursing for a few years. So I have enough of a foundation to know that certain things aren't adding up to me. And so I wanted to go to your expertise and see where I might be onto something and where maybe I'm clear off base. My number one doubt about the claim Donald Trump makes when he says, I was shot. 2 days before the FBI came out and did the press release where they had determined Donald Trump had been shot, 2 days prior, FBI Director Christopher Wray,
yes,
under oath, said there was some confusion about that, and they hadn't yet been able to determine whether it was a fragment, something that might have ricocheted. They didn't really know. Now, Donald Trump threw a fit, and 2 days later, magically, the FBI suddenly knows. 2 centimeters, I looked for something in the real world that most people could identify with, and that's the distance across the face of a nickel, right?
Yeah.
Just a coin across.
It's about a half an inch.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, about a half an inch.
It's not a small wound.
No.
As I'm sure you are well aware, any type of wound to the face, the head, the ear, bleeds rather profusely because the capillaries are so rich and so close to the surface of the skin. So I've just kind of fed out a little bit of my thoughts. Now I'm going to toss it over to you. When you think about the fact that Donald Trump says he was shot, which to me means that he was hit by an intact bullet fired from a weapon, and that he supposedly, according to Ronnie Jackson, had a 2-centimeter wound, and then 2 weeks later, we see a photograph of his ear looking in perfect condition. What are your thoughts on this, Andrea?
Well, my thoughts are, I've seen plenty of gunshot wounds. I mean, while I was in practice, the assault weapons ban was in place. So I can't say that I've ever seen a wound from an assault weapon, but I've seen plenty of gunshot wounds. Plenty. And it to me, if it actually hit, if an actual bullet hit his ear, that made a 2-centimeter wound. And I actually think it was less than 2 weeks that we saw his ear healed.
Yes. I believe that as well. Yes.
I mean, it's just unfathomable to me that it was a bullet. I think many doctors, and I saw a lot of posts, and I wish I remembered who they were, but many doctors were saying, no, come on. No way was this a bullet. And, look, I mean, a guy died. A guy died at that rally.
Right.
And I just feel like, maybe we should be talking about him and really looking into what actually happened. I mean, what a security failure that was.
Oh, boy.
I mean, there was this, didn't the fireman he tried to protect his kids and was shot and killed. I mean, maybe we should be talking about him than Donald Trump's little nick from probably debris.
Right.
Because obviously somebody was shot. People were shot.
Right.
The guy definitely had a gun, but Donald Trump, in my opinion, was not shot with a bullet.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that 2 people are dead as a result of this rally. I see, and it's fine. Look, when I post something, I'm not going to set rules about the opinions that people post in comments. Everybody's got their own take and their opinion, and as long as their intentions are good and they're not saying something that violates Twitter's or X's standards and going to get me in trouble.
Whatever those are.
Sure. Right. Who knows, right? Exactly. When I post about the ear discrepancy, a lot of people post or will comment below about, that this was fake, it was staged, and look, I can understand why some people might be inclined to think that. Now, I must say, I'm not one of them, because two people are dead, right? We know that there were people shot. That's pretty real, okay? That's pretty real. Now, as far as the intricacies of all of that, as you stated, I think we need a very thorough investigation so that we can find out the hows and whys of why those 2 people are dead. But as it pertains to Donald Trump's ear, let me say this. I wouldn't be making such a big deal of this if it were my neighbor, Jim, who was at a rock concert where there was some type of shooting, and where something struck his ear while the gunfire was going off. And then my neighbor Jim tells people, yeah, I was one of the people that got shot. I wouldn't make a big fuss out of my neighbor Jim saying that. It would be clear that, yeah, you were there, you were injured, something struck your ear, and I'm not going to argue with you over whether it was a fragment or it was a bullet. But we're not talking about my neighbor Jim. We're talking about the former president of the United States, who is the most documented liar in terms of presidents, and I would argue in terms of maybe anybody in history. And whether it's fair or not, when somebody like that, who commands the national, international audience that he does, the facts matter. Were you shot in that an intact bullet hit your ear, or were you struck by some type of fragmentation or some glass that ricocheted? I think we need a level of transparency with our leaders that leaves no question. When the answers are there to be had, they shouldn't stop until they have the answers and then share them with the public. That's why I make such a big deal of this.
Well, and especially since he's running around saying, I took a bullet for you. I took a bullet for democracy. I took a bullet. Well, okay. Where's the proof?
Right.
Where's the proof that you took a bullet? Because I'm not seeing it. And certainly like I posted something about it on Twitter, and the MAGA bots and trolls attacked me. It was a graze. It wasn't a graze. A graze at the tip of the ear would have taken off cartilage.
Yes.
And that does not grow back.
Right.
Which is I'm a good healer. Like, are you serious?
Right.
That doesn't happen.
I agree. At this point in history, and maybe we will be there someday, but at this point in history, we don't grow cartilage back. If we did, we would not have complete knee replacements.
Right.
We'd just get the treatment to grow our cartilage back.
Right.
And again, I hope we see that someday, but as of now, it does not exist.
No, it does not. And so I just, the whole thing is ridiculous. And, you know, what bothers me really about it was after the Republicans in Congress got all mad and sad about Donald Trump's, getting mad that Chris Wray said that he thought it was debris. And then the FBI changed their story. I mean, what's up with that?
Right.
You're the FBI. You're not supposed to be changing your story. What are you doing?
Right. Here's my thing. If 48 hours before you testified under oath that there was some confusion,
Yeah.
and that it couldn't be pinpointed exactly what struck his ear, it seems highly unlikely to me that 48 hours later you suddenly have clarity, conclusive evidence that, oh gosh, it was a bullet that struck his ear. And I know, look, I one of my big hang-ups is, look, I understand the word conspiracy or conspiracy theory is used by some people appropriately, but it's also a term that's been thrown around so much that it's often used by people who throw it at anything they don't agree with and say, oh, here comes the conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Now, there's a fine line between a conspiracy theorist and a scientist, in that they are both not satisfied with the current explanation. Now, the difference between, in my worldview, which I'm not suggesting this is everybody's worldview, but in my mind, the difference between a conspiracy theorist and a scientist is that a scientist asks questions about things to get more answers, whereas a conspiracy theorist starts right in with statements of certainty about, well, this is what happened, and I know. And I'm not going to say I've never been guilty of that. I'm sure I have. But I try my best to keep it an exploratory question. We need to know more, because you've not provided us with something substantial enough for it to explain the discrepancies. You just haven't. And so until then, we can't buy into your explanation.
And then that's exactly what it is. And I see posts all day long about, it was staged. And then that just, to me, is not like legit. I mean, it was,
Right.
I mean, as I said, people died. I mean,
Right.
Look, I wouldn't put it past Trump to kill somebody for his political benefit.
Nor would I.
Look what happened with COVID. He actually did do that. But this, I mean, no. I mean, there was a shooter. He got hit with a flying piece of debris. It nicked his ear. He bled. He did his little, like, biffed up thingy, and, now is selling whatever. He's selling something. Selling his little book and his coins and his stupid. I mean, what are even those trading cards? Like, you don't even get like an actual piece of like cardboard with those.
Right. Yeah. I preferred the days when I got a little flat piece of gum and some baseball cards I could actually hold.
What is that? The guy is such a grifter. I mean, it's amazing to me, really. After he trashed the economy, killed people with COVID, that there are 40% of Americans that are actually considering about voting for this guy again. I don't get it.
Right. And I have to say, Andrea, that was such a icing on the cake moment for me as a Republican.
You were a Republican?
I'm a former Republican. Yeah. A lot of people. Yeah. The whole COVID thing, as I watched that, and again, I don't even pretend to have the knowledge or level of expertise that a physician does. I'm not saying that at all. But I had enough of a foundational experience about things that I felt I was noticing things that maybe somebody who'd never worked in the medical field wasn't paying attention to. And I was just, my mind was blown. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on with this guy? We've got some of the nation's top immunologists, virologists. We've got people from all around the world begging to share what they know with the leaders of countries around the world to allow them to better plan for this. And this guy is telling us in a couple of weeks, it'll be like magic. It'll just poof, and it will vanish. And I have to tell you, I was losing my fucking mind during that.
Well, I can tell you from my experience, you know, when it first started, I was seeing these really disturbing videos from Italy with doctors posting that they didn't have enough beds, they didn't have enough ventilators, they didn't have enough anything. And in the U.S., we only had Trump saying, oh, it's going to go away, this is going to be nothing. And I'm looking at these videos from Italy going, oh my God, we're in deep shit. And the funny thing is that I was playing tennis at the time, and all these women that I played tennis with were coming up to me and asking me, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think was going to happen? Even my coach who owned the club, he's like, well, what do you think is going to happen? And I'm like, we're going to lock down. He's like, no, we're not. I'm like, dude, we are going to lock down because this is bad. I mean, you don't even know. Sure. I'm seeing these videos, just like doctors posting desperate videos from Italy. I don't know if you remember seeing any of those.
I do.
And, a lot of these people they weren't on social media. They didn't really pay attention. And then there's Trump out there lying about it. And I'm like, oh, we're going to lock down. And now I was living in Ohio at the time. If you look behind me, that's the Delaware Bay.
Nice.
Now. So
awesome.
But yeah, I mean, there was no way that what Trump was saying was even remotely true about that virus. And he just mismanaged it, to a point where, I mean, I have no words to be honest. It was just so
and that's
bad.
The thing.
It was so bad. And so many people died needlessly. And they're still dying needlessly because they're now in the anti-vax, people are still, I posted, people are still taking ivermectin, for Christ's sake.
Right.
It's not a drug that has been approved for COVID. It's an anti-parasitic. And people will cite this stupid study. Somebody did this study that said that, ivermectin will do something to the mRNA or the RNA or blah, blah, blah. But you have to take it in doses that are toxic.
Right.
That's what the study said. But they still post the study like, ooh, here's a medical study, doctor. Which is like, yeah, hey, whatever.
Yeah. And that's the fascinating thing for me about ivermectin. So let's just sit aside for just a moment the efficacy of the drug, right? I have seen fairly recent studies, I guess, indicating that yes, it might, as you said, in doses that are toxic, be somewhat effective for COVID. But here's the thing. Pouring a fifth of Jim Beam bourbon on my daughter's abrasions from her bicycle accident has enough alcohol that, yes, it will serve probably as an initial and effective antiseptic. But we also have Povidine that we can get for, $8 at over the counter that's commonly used and generally recognized as, okay, this is what you would initially use. So I think the big thing for me is, why are you so hung up on the ivermectin? Just because something could work, might work, we've got these new vaccines. Now, I guess I just answered my own question. I do know they were all hung up on the idea that these vaccines were new, right? And the technologies, they didn't know enough about the technologies. They thought there would be, side effects. And as you know, as a physician, there are side effects to every drug.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I mean, just look at your TV every 30 seconds and you see like every pharmaceutical ad
Yeah,
has like a list of everything. You're like, oh my God, I'm not taking that.
right.
But what I guess, yeah, I mean, the vaccines for some people had, I mean, mild side effects. I mean, I took both the Moderna and the Pfizer. I took the Moderna initially because that's the one I could get. Because I'm telling you, the minute I was able to get that vaccine, I was running. My husband, who's still a practicing urologist, got his like a couple months before me. And then I actually had what they call Moderna arm. And a lot of people would say, oh, that's an allergic reaction. It's not. It's an allergic reaction because my arm got kind of red and swollen, but it's not. It's literally called Moderna arm. And it's a normal reaction that some people have. Mostly women get it. Um, and it's fine. I mean, I never got sick. So I had the Moderna twice. And then, as the newer vaccines came out, I switched to Pfizer and I don't nearly have like the Pfizer I'm fine with. So I don't get that same red swollen arm.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's the only, I did the entire Pfizer series and then
Okay.
the boosters. Um, I don't even really recall if I had any side effects. They were just maybe a little bit of malaise for, a day or two, just as my immune system was ramping up in response to the vaccine. But other than that, no.
And as far as like my husband and my parents are in their 80s. They never had any side effects to the vaccine. My husband never had it. Just me. Just
Yeah,
me.
you,
Um,
you know, my parents, my dad just turned 82. He and his wife have had multiple uh, boosters and, complete series, and they are scheduled, I think, later in this week to get one of the newer ones, I
yeah,
think.
I would recommend that everybody get that. I mean, I know that there's a new strain of COVID coming out, but like, I don't know when they're going to get that vaccine out. And I would just suggest everybody, if you can, just go get it.
Yeah,
Go get it because I mean, I've been lucky. I have never had COVID. My parents have never had COVID. My husband's never had COVID. And my husband works in a hospital where people get COVID all like
sure.
come in with COVID all the time and he's never gotten it.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, I mean, the vaccines and as we all say, they may not prevent you from getting COVID, but they're going to prevent you from dying.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's, you don't want to end up on ECMO.
No,
We were seeing before the vaccines came out. I mean, you don't want to be on a ventilator. You don't want to be on ECMO. I mean, just, it was so bad. And I think people memory hold bad things, I think.
oh, I
They,
think so
they
too.
don't want to think about it. They don't want to remember how bad it was. Because it was,
Right.
I remember how bad it was. I remember, because my husband's a urologist. He wasn't like an essential worker. So he was doing virtual visits for a while. But when he went back into the hospital before vaccines were out, like we were scared, like I was scared to death.
Oh,
My daughter was home
absolutely.
from school doing online learning and, we were all scared to death. He used to come in, to the house I was living in Akron at the time, Akron, Ohio. And he would come in and like we had a shower right out the garage. and he would shower off the garage before he actually entered the house. So, I mean, it was a really scary time.
It was. It. I recall during. I don't know whether this would have been. Probably would have been 2019 or 20. I can't recall. But I should start by saying I've never had COVID either. And I attribute that, I should say, not contribute, I attribute that to being vaccinated, but also thinking intelligently. For example, when we were still kind of in the worst part, and by the worst part, I don't just mean death count, but I also mean in the midst of the confusion where scientists are still working to try and get a handle on this and figure out, all of the variables that are at play and how to best manage them. And my side of the family had this, we called off basically Christmas and Thanksgiving get-togethers. And my wife's side of the family, they were going to go ahead and have a small, but a larger than I was comfortable with Thanksgiving. And I said, we're not going. Yeah, it's senseless. Neither one of us have had COVID. It's not like everybody that's going to be there is testing or is going to test before they come. And again, keep in mind, this was before we knew everything that we know now.
Yeah.
And somebody might say, look, well, you could have just let your wife and kids go and you just stay home. No, that would make no sense either, because when they come back, I'm going to be here. Now,
Yeah.
My wife is 24 years younger than I. I'm 58. My wife will be 33, 34. I better get that figured out before
Yeah, you
the
better.
birthday comes up, right? Later in this, or next month, rather. I better get that figured out, too. But, I explained to her, I said, look, you've got a lot more resiliency. At this time, she was probably, 30? I was 55, 56. I said, it's just not a smart move. And it wasn't like we had a blowout about it, but I had to explain, this is why. And it just doesn't make sense. And so I think a lot of people who avoided COVID, it was a combination of the vaccine and thinking intelligently, because you and I both know plenty of people who got the fucking vaccine and then went apeshit and just started doing everything like, oh, I'm good to go. I've got the vaccine. Not thoroughly understanding this is like the flu vaccine is to prevent hospitalization due to influenza. Same principle. It's not so that you never get influenza. And I think, I don't know how we could have done so, but looking back, I think if we would have had more education in discussions of those kinds of things, like, look, you've got and I know they did tell these things, I just don't know that it was enough or in enough different venues where the bulk of the nation was able to get it.
Well, I mean, but you literally had an entire political party.
Oh, absolutely.
The minute Biden said, okay, everybody go get the vaccine, it's free, they were like, oh no, don't do that, because Biden said it. I mean, I remember watching MSNBC one day, and Chuck Todd, thank God he's, but Chuck Todd is like, well, I don't know how Biden's going to get all these vaccines in arms, but he did. He did. And
Yes.
the issue is, but you have an entire political party that's basically, that has oppositional disorder, right? everything that Biden does or everything that Harris wants to do, they oppose it. They have oppositional disorder. There's nothing good that they do that they're okay with. They just hate everything. They hate
Right.
and that's how do you govern? How do you be a political party and govern when you just all you want to say is no,
Right.
right?
You know,
No, 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 no.
you bring up a great point. 2 or 3 years back, this is while I was, well, it was longer than that because I've been identified as a Democrat now since late 2018, early 2019, somewhere in that period. But just prior to that, I would often have some friends I had in the community suggest that I run either for mayor or sheriff in this small town that I live in. Now, one thing about me as a Republican, I had always been a very big, outspoken advocate for the LGBTQ community. Simply because I'm just anti-bully about anything, right?
Mhm.
I identify with the underdog. And when I see another underdog getting their ass kicked, there's just something in me that says, you know what, we may lose this, but I'm going to fight with you. And so even though I voted Republican, I had no qualms about speaking out. And so my point is, my answer back to anybody who suggested that I ran for either of those offices was similar to what you just said, or for the reason I knew that most people in this small community of 6,000 people knew that I didn't toe the line when it came to the Republican Party. And how can you effectively do your job when you know that 8 out of 10 people are voting for somebody like Trump and who have the same mindset and the same position? Now, many could argue, and rightfully so, that for that very reason, that's why somebody like myself needs to run. And I won't argue with that. At the time, though, it felt futile to me. And that's pretty weak, I know, because those are the types of situations where we need to step forward anyway. But I wasn't thinking like that at the time. I was just thinking, look, they're going to tie my hands as many different ways as they can on the things that I would try to do and implement.
Well, and you never would have won a primary.
Right. No.
I
No.
mean, look what happened to Kinzinger and Cheney. I mean, they stood up for the United States of America instead of Donald Trump, and
Right.
they lost their primaries. So, I mean, the Republican Party is gone. I mean,
It is gone.
I don't really see a way forward for them unless, like, if we do not win this election, well, first of all, we're going to have an Orban style
Yes.
dictatorship.
Agreed.
But if we win this election, I don't see how the Republicans come back, because who's left? Who's there?
Yeah, there's nobody there.
There's nobody there. Like, you look at the Democrats and you see this deep bench. You see, Jasmine Crockett and Pete Buttigieg and just all these, and Jamie Harrison.
Yes, Jamie Harrison. Yeah.
Jamie Raskin and just all these really great, like, people.
They're right. It's like the All-Star
Gary
team.
Moskowitz and
Yes.
and where's that on the Republican side? I mean, you have Lauren Boebert
Right.
and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, who do you have? Heck,
You're,
Cruz?
you're right. So many of these people have, through the support and the enabling of Donald Trump the past 9 years, if you include the campaign year before 2016, they've got the scarlet letter on their sweater, right? It's
Just
not
think
like,
that Nancy Mace with her,
yes, right?
you know,
Yes.
yeah,
They've put themselves in such a position that they can never get the proverbial monkey off their back from their past behavior and identification. They could never resurrect the Republican Party of old because they are too strongly identified with Trump. And in the absence of those people, as you stated, who is there? There is no one.
yeah. I mean, I really can't think of anybody like off the top of my head, like that somebody does. I mean, Jim Jordan. I mean, good God. I mean, I lived in Ohio. I mean, he wasn't in my district. Actually, my rep was Chantel Brown. I voted for her. Um, but that's Akron, Cleveland area. But Jim
Right.
Jordan, I mean, his district is so gerrymandered. He's never gonna like. I love these people trying to
Sure.
to defeat Jim Jordan, but frankly, it's not gonna happen.
Right.
It's not going to happen because the Ohio legislature, even though the voters of Ohio, I can speak to Ohio politics because I was there for almost 30 years. Um, the voters of Ohio voted to end gerrymandering, and Mike DeWine and the rest of the, like Frank LaRose and the rest of the fascists, because they are.
Yes.
And they're criminals too. I mean, with all that First Energy stuff, but they're just like, no, we're just going to ignore the voters. And they did. They
Right.
ignored the voters. And so Jim Jordan's district is safe. I mean, he's got what? A couple rural counties and some cows. I mean, basically that's all you got in
Right.
his. It's pathetic.
I recently had a guest on by the name of Eric Richardson, who's running for office here in Missouri, and who I had him on because we had a phone call where in that phone call, in just a short period of time, the way he presented the idea that even if it's widely known that you're probably not going to win, it's still important to run. As you mentioned, you said, I love these people who try. And he made a pretty compelling case, and that's the gist of what we talked about on that episode, is if we don't run people against the Jim Jordans, then you never have the opportunity to have Jim Jordan under the microscope long enough during a campaign season, for example, that you show the community, you show the state the inherent flaws in somebody like Jim Jordan. So if for no other reason, then you have that period of attack ads where you can highlight and put those people under the microscope. We hope it has a kind of a chipping away effect over time. And as Eric Richardson pointed out, in some cases that may be a generation or more. But the idea that we just keep fighting is so important, even as you said, look, in the near future, nobody's going to beat Jim Jordan. And that's a pretty tough and bitter pill to swallow. But if you are a realist, that's the conclusion you're going to come to.
Well, I mean, I know you probably follow David Pepper.
Yes.
On Twitter. That's his thing, is that even though, it's going to be difficult and it's going to be a while, but we need to, like, the Democrats need to make sure that they run somebody in every one of these districts. And I mean, look at Virginia. I mean, and even like the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson in Louisiana. Uh-oh, I have low power mode. I'm
Oh, there we go.
expecting to use my phone. I may have to go in and get my charger.
Okay, that's fine.
But
We can do that.
okay. Yeah, I was hoping to use my computer and I wasn't prepared to use my phone. But yeah, they're like, he ran unopposed. The reason he's Speaker of the House, because he had no opponent. I'm going to run and get my charger
You
real quick.
got it. So, Ed, we were talking about the importance of running strong Democratic candidates
Yeah,
against these seats that at the outset we may be very confident that we're not going to topple now.
yeah,
But the idea is in thinking a generation ahead. And you know, in a world where the impulsivity and the demand for everything right now, that's a tough concept for many people to think, okay, I'm going to do it because in another generation this might pay off for the Democratic Party. Uh, but there are people out there, thank goodness, who will think like that and who will run and who will run a real hard campaign just for that reason. And I tip my hat to them.
yes. And I think, I mean, what David Pepper always says is it's the infrastructure of
Yes,
party. You know, getting candidates to run in every race, you know, building that infrastructure so that, you know, because that's what Republicans did, right? While we were like twiddling our thumbs and not doing anything, the Democrats kind of let them take over school boards, which we're seeing now is like
yes,
bananas, and local governments. And what and how scary that is, especially for when the election results come in. It's scary. I mean,
absolutely.
look what's happening in Georgia. My God.
That's a spooky situation. And I'm sure there are others that we could put into that category that are equally as spooky. You know, one of the things I'm curious as to whether you feel the same way. As a former Republican, one of the things I had always noticed, and I guess even as a Republican was bothered by when I looked at the Democratic Party, it just didn't seem like they would ball up their fists and fight as hard as Republicans would, right? Um, I, for lack of better word or words, it didn't seem like they were willing to push the envelope and go beyond what was socially and politically acceptable to win. Now, I'm not suggesting breaking of the laws because we've seen what that results in from the recent Republican Party. I'm just talking about being able to dig down, get that grit, tenacity, and knuckle it out to the end.
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny. I mean, as I said, like I've never been a Republican. I hope you didn't like misconstrued me. I've always been a
Oh,
Democrat.
okay, I got you,
I have
got
always
you.
been a Democrat, but I had said, welcome to the club. Welcome
I
to our
got you.
club.
Okay, yes, I did
But
misinterpret that.
yeah, but I do feel like you have a point there. I mean, the Democrats have always been like wonky and just too wonky, I
Right.
guess, if you just want to say it. I mean, look, I mean, the Republicans have been dirty tricking like Willie Horton. There was the Swift boats. I mean, they they've been doing this for years. I mean, this is nothing new.
Right.
The, it's gotten like weirder and more like I guess for me, like the misogyny with the Hillary Clinton campaign was just like our like for me, it just, I was so taken aback by the misogyny
Yeah.
there. And now I'm seeing it again, but now it's just racism and misogyny. They call it what? Misogynoir.
Right. That's
With
the thing.
Paris.
So many new terms have had to be developed to
Yeah.
explain
I
so
mean,
much of what's happening.
it's for me, and I really appreciate that the Harris campaign and the
Mm,
Democrats are fighting back.
that's what I'm leading up to.
Yeah.
Look,
I mean, it's about damn time.
it is, you know, this is what I know. I started writing about this probably a couple of years ago, both in articles that I do and on my posts on social media. I I would write about the importance of taking a different kick-ass attitude. And to my delight, there were a hell of a lot of Democrats who agreed with me, right? I wasn't sure initially how it was going to be perceived. I thought there may be this sense of, oh, look at this former Republican talking this shit. He doesn't belong in our party. That wasn't the case at all. So many people had recognized the need for that, and to see it actually happening now, I can confidently say, I'm now seeing the kind of fighting and the attitude and the spirit in the Democratic Party that I always wanted to see, even as a Republican. And it may sound weird to hear somebody say that, but there was a part of me as a Republican, even though I was voting that way, that oftentimes felt like, look, the only reason we kicked your ass on this issue is because you didn't fight us back hard. If you would have just fought us hard, you could have won on this issue, right? And that just used to disturb me to no end. So now, especially that I'm here in this Democratic Party, I'm like, my God, thank you for finally.
Exactly. Like the power of sound bites, right?
Oh yes,
Like
absolutely.
the whole weird thing, it delights me to no end.
Yes,
You're
yes,
weird. Because you are weird.
and that the
You're weird. Like
brilliance of that.
you fist bump some lady, you go and you can't even order donuts. You're weird.
Right.
You're
That's
weird.
that's on the same level for me in terms of marketing brilliance as the two-word phrase a few years back, shit happens, that caught on, right? And
Yeah.
for years, and still, you hear it used by people fairly regularly, shit happens. And everybody knows that phrase. Everybody probably has used it, and they're weird or you're weird. It's got that same kind of snap, that same kind of, just like Velcro. It hooks on to people and it doesn't let go. And I
Yeah.
think that's
And it's
incredible.
also true.
Exactly.
Also true.
And I
mean,
think that's
they
the
are.
Velcro part. That's the
Yeah.
Velcro part right there.
Yeah.
It sticks because it's true.
Yeah. I mean, the Democrats have always been, as I said, wonky. They're talking about policy. They're talking about this. They're talking about that. When was the last time you heard a Republican talk seriously about policy? They just make shit up.
That's it.
Make shit up about the border. They make shit up about, that they made shit up about the ACA. They made shit up about abortion. Oh my God, don't even get me started on that.
Right.
Democrats are, supporting babies getting aborted after birth. Well, that doesn't happen. That's not even a thing. Why? And the press has been letting them lie about that.
Is there anything,
years.
as a physician, let me ask you this, because I agree with you. To my knowledge, it's not even a
It's not a
thing.
thing. No.
So let me ask you then, as a physician, what might they be thinking of or have in mind when they say that they are exaggerating and blowing up into this? What's the closest we could get to that medically?
Oh, I know. Well, they're talking about what Ralph Northam, who is the governor of Virginia, and what he was talking about at the time was comfort care for an infant, a newborn who was born with a fatal condition. Nobody was saying they crushed their souls or their skulls or anything. They
Sure.
were just saying to give them comfort care and let them die. And Republicans just glommed onto that. And like now all we hear is, they want to kill babies after they're born. Well, no, as everybody says on Twitter, that would be a school shooting like we had yesterday.
Yes.
Um,
Tragically.
no, I mean, like no woman is pregnant, to term. Like a full term infant is usually like 34 weeks on, right? Nobody is aborting a 34-week infant. It just
Right.
doesn't happen. It doesn't
Yep.
happen. And of course they always like all the MAGAs always bring that Pennsylvania Dr. Gosnell, but that's just bullshit. I don't even want to like I don't engage with MAGA, as you probably know. I
Right.
just block them.
I do too.
Um,
I might throw a little barb at them right before I block them. But
yeah, but I just don't. I don't even
yeah,
bother. And I like if any of my supporters are watching this, can I just ask you? It's just please, it's a waste of your time to argue with anti-vaxxers
it
that
is.
just the MAGA like pro-life, which they're not.
Right.
People. It's just and the amosexuals. I mean, it's a waste of time.
It is.
So, but yeah, so I think that's where this particular talking point came from. But it's absolute bullshit. I mean, no doctor, and I've said this on Twitter many, 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 many times, is going to sit there and let a healthy full-term infant die.
I was going
Like
to say
it's illegal.
I was going to say let me pause and right there and ask you about this. I'm sure as a physician that I think many people think of malpractice insurance as something that would just cover any stupid thing a physician might do. My guess is that if a physician is knowingly breaking the law or violating some really intense policy knowingly, malpractice insurance probably doesn't extend out to cover that. In other words, if you knowingly broke the law in some way, you're probably going to get
Indicted?
Yes, right.
Indicted.
I mean,
Yeah,
am I right?
like that guy in Pennsylvania did. He got
Yeah.
indicted.
Right.
It wasn't just malpractice. It was, he was indicted. I
And
mean,
is that always in the back of your mind as a treating physician?
mm,
No. I mean, for example, let's say you go up to the point to where it's going to start getting into a potential gray area as it pertains to the law. If there's something that is very clearly understood by the average physician as you can't go there, you can't do that, that's going to be an illegal act. Are you constantly having that in the back of your mind as you approach those situations, or no?
well, I mean, I can tell you 100% that never, ever, ever came up while I was practicing.
Okay, cool.
But I can tell you now, probably it's occurring to ER physicians and OBGYNs right now because these Republicans are writing laws that are ridiculously vague, right? They don't know. I mean, every hospital has a legal department. You know this, right? Like every hospital has a legal department. So they're probably getting.
I must admit, I knew there was a department that kind of handled some issues like that, but I guess I never really.
Yeah, no, there is
Yeah.
a legal department pretty much in every big hospital system. Probably the little ones, they probably have a lawyer on retainer. But so these doctors are getting like instruction from the legal department because these laws that Republicans write are really, really vague. They don't really tell you. I mean, that's why they're letting women bleed out in parking lots. Like no doctor that I ever practiced with that I knew would ever do that. Right. I mean, it's insane. I mean, look at that crazy Ohio lawmaker who tried to put a clause in one of those anti-abortion laws that doctors had to reimplant ectopic pregnancies, which
That's insane.
insane.
Yes.
You can't do that.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Right.
So, I mean, these laws are written by Alec. You know what Alec is, right? Of course
Yes.
you do. Alec, and then they're embellished by just nut job Republican lawmakers, and you read them and they're impossible to navigate for a treating physician. I mean, you don't go through medical school and residency to end your career in jail,
I was going to
right?
say,
For
is
treating
this
somebody.
is this resulting in a lot of early retirements?
I don't know. But I probably some, especially in red states. But what we have seen a trend in, and I've been kind of following this, is that medical students do not apply for residencies in red states that have these strict anti-abortion laws. And can I just tell you that is going to impact the physician population in those states, and not just OB and not just ER, because physicians tend to marry physicians. I'm married to a urologist, right? So
Right.
for years to come, because they're just not going to go there. And physicians tend to stay where they did their residency. I stayed in Akron, Ohio for 30 years, where I did my residency. Well, I did my residency in Cleveland, but yeah, I was in Ohio for 30 years.
And do you think that, let me ask you about that. I'm just curious. Do you think that's because you're already there and kind of established, and so to some extent it's just like, I don't want to go through a big move again. I'll just stay here.
I think it's a number of factors. I mean, you know the doctors that you're working with,
Right.
you know the people there, you've been there. Like my residency was 3 years long, my husband's was 5 years long. I mean, you just kind of get dug in. Also, he was from Akron. I dragged his ass
I
out to
got you.
Delaware.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think I think it is a trend, like because they tend to marry like who they work with. Either it's other healthcare workers, other doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists. They just, that's who they meet because they spend all their life in a hospital.
Would it be an understatement to say that this is going to lead to a healthcare crisis in red states?
It's already happening. It's already happening. Did you hear about, this may not be just the anti-abortion thing, but it's the not expanding Medicaid stuff that Republican governors are doing. Did you hear they had to drive one of the victims from the shooting yesterday about an hour and a half to 2 hours to a hospital because there was no local hospital that could take them?
I did not.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think like Republican governors and Republican governance is not good for healthcare in this country. It really is just like, I don't know, like even if you look at what was happening before Roe was overturned in like southern Texas, I mean, there were no like healthcare clinics for women.
Right.
And now there's even less. And I don't know, Texas is going to be bad. Texas is going to be bad. Iowa is already bad. Idaho is the case coming up in the Supreme Court where they're trying to decide whether women deserve EMTALA or not. You know what EMTALA is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Whether women get to be treated like actual humans, the Emergency Medicine Transfer and Labor Act.
as a physician, when you think about something like that, is it just impossible to even get your head around that these kinds of discussions are even occurring?
It is actually. I mean, it's just, I don't understand like how, like, cause when Dobbs was overturned and even when it was leaked, like the Dobbs decision was leaked, I was like, how are they gonna navigate EMTALA? Because EMTALA, like, you can't just turn people away. I mean, as an emergency physician, we know EMTALA. I mean, we live and breathe EMTALA every day. You can't, you can't refuse to treat anybody on their ability to pay. Anybody who presents to your emergency department gets a full screening exam. And of course, there's always that, what is a full screening exam? Well, basically, it's being put back in a room and getting a full workup, in my opinion. So when you say that women are being turned away and not even being really like totally evaluated and left to, miscarry in toilets and bleed out in a parking lot, like how is that gonna square with EMTALA? And I've been saying that for, well, as I said, since the Dobbs decision leaked. And now we know. Now it's in front of the Supreme Court, and they're hiding it. They forgot that some of us remember that because they're going to do it after the election.
Is it something that even can square?
Even what?
Can it even square? You said I was wondering how that was going to square.
Well,
is it
I mean, clearly it shouldn't, but
right?
Somehow the Supreme Court decided to take the case.
Right.
Which to me is insane. Like, why would you take this case?
What do you think results out of? Let's say they give it their stamp of approval, right? What kind of a gap? Because I guess metaphorically, when I think about two things squaring, in my mind, I kind of see two things lining up edge to edge, so there are no gaps, right? Everything's lined up. What are the gaps that occur if the Supreme Court sides with them?
What decides that EMTALA doesn't apply to a certain segment of the population,
yes,
like pregnant women? Well, I mean, you're going to see like, okay, so now state law trumps federal law, right? Because EMTALA is a federal law, and these crazy state laws. So, and of course, women yet again are second class citizens. So, and that's why leaving, like how the Republicans like to say, oh, well, we're going to leave it to the states because states can make their own decisions. Except for the states, like a lot of these states are refusing to put abortion rights on the ballot, making it very difficult to put abortion rights on the ballot because when they have been on the ballot, they've won. So, yeah, so it's federal law versus state law. And I always thought, I mean, I was always of the opinion, or people told me that federal law trumps state law, but I guess that's what we're dealing with now with the Supreme Court with the Idaho decision. So,
and that's a topic in and of itself.
yeah,
The whole state law versus federal law thing. Look, I know that people much smarter than me could list pros and cons until January on this issue, but just in general, would it be better? Wow, I'm just thinking about this. I almost don't even want to ask it because the answer seems so obvious. Would it be better if there was just one law, federal law, or just one law, state law, where each state decides everything for themselves? Let's look at it as it comes to medical decisions. I guess the the answer to that is it depends. It depends what the federal law is, or it depends on what the state law is as to whether it would be a good thing for potential patients, right? Because essentially we'd be saying, okay, we aren't going to have two different bodies that we have to balance out here and decide, federal law trump state law or state law trump federal law. That argument's gone because now it's clear. It's only this. So in that situation, then, I guess a red state would just be screwed, and a blue state would be good, and there would be no real opportunity until a state was flipped to do anything about it. What are your thoughts on that as a physician?
I mean, as a physician, I think that that for the most part, federal law tends to protect patients.
Okay.
It tends to protect patients. It tends to protect their rights. And the state laws that I have seen coming out are, as I said, crazy. Like, I don't know who votes these people in. But you have legislators like writing crazy shit laws. So you need a daddy. You need a big daddy, like the federal government, or a big mommy.
Right.
Telling you, no, dummies, you can't reimplant an ectopic pregnancy. No, dummies, you can't let women bleed out in parking lots. No, dummies, like a woman whose baby is non-viable, but still has a heartbeat, who's getting septic, needs an abortion.
Right.
These are laws that need to be, I think, come down from the federal government.
And I like that answer, because not in every case, clearly, but in so many cases, I think the fact that there is a separate state law that was born out of a resistance or dislike of the federal law. So the state law, they legislate this new state law in an attempt to get around the federal law. So coming back to the idea that you think federal law protects patients, I guess the argument could be made that many state laws are really an attempt to undermine the very federal law that protects. I mean, again, I know somebody could point to many exceptions to that, but it is something worth considering, the conflict that comes up as it relates to human rights.
Yeah, I mean, I think, all these laws that are coming out in some of the red states about gender affirming care and things like that. I mean, and to be honest, I am not well versed in that. But
sure.
I mean,
nor am I.
I just feel like, doctors who do this care, and a lot of them are urologists. My husband doesn't do it. But a lot of them are urologists, care deeply about these kids, and the endocrinologists that take care of them care deeply about these children. And the fact that they are vilifying these kids, and most of them aren't even getting anything done. They're probably going through therapy, for Christ's sake, before they even get anything done. I mean, nobody's going in and cutting off the genitals of your 12-year-old, for Christ's sake. Right. I mean, the whole premise and the whole boogeyman thing that Republicans do, it's bullshit. Everything they say is bullshit. I'm sorry. Everything they say is bullshit. Right. They say bullshit about abortion. They say bullshit about trans kids. I mean, they say bullshit about the border. I mean, do they ever tell the truth is what I want to know.
No, and that's one thing. I mean, when you look at clearly with Trump, but with the other I guess, MAGA members of the political world. Does anybody really have any idea, and we both know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway, does anybody really have an idea of what Trump is about policy-wise in the 2024 election? Nobody has any fucking clue because he doesn't talk about policy. The only time he even touches on policy is when he realizes he's been made to look bad in the press about something that he said, so he just drums up some bullshit story and lies about what he would do, when in many cases, I'm sure he doesn't even understand the policy that he's addressing. You know, there have been many people from his administration who have come out and said he didn't even know where certain well-known countries were, where they were located on the, you know, he couldn't tell you where on the map it was located. So the idea that he would have any kind of thorough understanding of any of the policies he's talking about, and I think for Donald Trump, at least, that's why he doesn't talk much policy, because he doesn't understand policy. His idea of governing is just to do what he wants, the way he wants, without regard for anybody else.
Well, Trump is a vessel for groups like the Heritage Foundation,
yes,
and the Project 2025.
Right.
He's just their vessel.
He is.
To implement their policies. And Vance, I'll tell you, was their pick. Vance was totally their pick. Trump, the only reason Trump is running for president is to stay out of jail and make himself rich.
It is.
I mean, that's the only, he has no policy positions. He has no convictions. I mean, did you see his speech at the New York something today? It was some financial group. It was super sleepy, and they asked him like specific questions, and of course it was like the typical Trump answer.
Right.
He has no policies. He has no convictions. Trump is running to stay out of jail and make himself rich. That's it.
Right.
Period.
That is it. And I don't know whether this is something they just didn't factor in, although I find that hard to imagine. They must have just decided that the flaws were less than the supposed strengths with J.D. Vance. But in my opinion...
Really? I mean, he's like a walking disaster.
This guy can connect with other human beings about as much as an earthworm, right? I mean, the clips we see of him at a state fair or a county fair, going up and trying to interact with, or in a restaurant here recently, there was where he's asking questions, like he's, attempting to create some rapport with them. You can tell the guy just doesn't have any idea. He's trying too hard, and in doing so, he's revealing many of his flaws. I know for non-MAGA people, like my father, is 82 years old, still a Republican. He's won't vote for Trump, for sure. I think he'll probably vote for Kamala Harris. We've had that discussion, but I know he absolutely will not vote for Donald Trump. But when I hear him talk about somebody like J.D. Vance, they just, even Republicans, again, I'm talking non-MAGA Republicans, they just don't have a good feeling about either of the two people that are going to be on that ticket. Even many of the Republicans I know personally, who in that first term were kind of caught up in the rah-rah, and let's kick ass, and, we're patriots. They've become very jaded with this whole thing because it's tiresome. You know, if look at it this way, if you went to a rock concert, your favorite band, let's just say I went to a Van Halen concert when they were in their heyday, which I did. But let's
I've
say,
been to a Van Halen concert.
yeah, those are hellacious shows, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I went to that every week, and they always played the same set. They didn't introduce any new theatrics or pyrotechnics. I knew what the first song was going to be all the way up through the last song. There's a point at which you're going to be so saturated, even though they're your favorite band, you're going to be so saturated you just can't do it anymore, right?
Yeah.
You're going to, if you're not burnt out on music entirely at that point, you're going to gravitate towards another band. To me, that's Donald Trump. He's the same concert with the same set list for 9 years now. People who were in the crowd had their lighters up, raising hell, yeah, in 2016, 17, 18. At this point, they're saying, oh, yeah, I know what the next song is. This is bullshit, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So,
he's a one-hit wonder.
yes,
He's
he
a
really
one-hit
is.
wonder.
Right.
He never says anything new. It's
Nothing.
everything's in 2 weeks, so we're gonna look into it bigly, greatly. He never answers a question.
Right.
He never has.
And for that reason, I absolutely love listening to Pete Buttigieg answer questions on talk shows.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anybody who has more fluently and effectively provided real answers in the area of politics in history. I mean, this guy, he's
He's gonna be president one day.
I believe so. I believe so. And that's
And we're
such a
never going to be able to spell his name.
right. True. So true.
I have to Google it every time I try to write it.
Right? Yeah. Is
Damn, I
it the
gotta
I
Google
and
it.
the E, or is it the E and I? Now, every time. You know, that's such a refreshing thing to me because, and this applies to both sides quite often. You listen to a campaign speech or you listen to them on interviews, during their term, and you hear reporters ask the questions that you would like to ask if you were there. And it's like we fall for it every time. We think, I'm so glad you asked that question. I want to know the answer. And yet we never really get the answer that we would have been demanding or that we would have kept asking until we got, because they've been coached in most cases on how to avoid having to answer the question. So it really makes it hard for people who, work all day and have kids and have things they have to do all the time. It really makes it difficult for them to be an informed voter because nobody's ever giving real answers. I don't know what the solution to that is. Now, clearly, one possibility, but it's not, again, for so many people, is that you do your own homework, right? You read and you do these things. But in the world that we live in today, time is a commodity. There are only so many hours in a day, and the expectation that the average voter is going to carve out the needed time to really be educated on all of the issues they're voting on, it's just not realistic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think the news media has kind of failed us. Like, I think a lot of left-leaning people on Twitter have felt like the media has failed us. They present a horse race and then expect they don't really present like what the candidates are saying.
Right.
And I don't think that, like, I guess there's some people out there that really care about, this tax thing and that tax thing. But I think most people who vote, it's an emotional thing. It's emotional.
Yes.
I agree that there's probably people out there who care, but they're not going to find much on the news media or in the print media, because I have been personally so disappointed with the New York Times and the Washington Post. I mean, Trump is literally spewing like crazy shit.
Right.
Like Hannibal Lecter. Like he thinks he's a real person. What is that?
Right.
And then they're like, well, Harris hasn't, told us her policies, but she has. It's on her website. So, I mean, because there's so many factors, like if people aren't paying attention, they're not paying attention. I mean, how do we reach these people? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, we text, but I mean, I knocked on doors in 2016. I called voters in 2016. I got my face slammed in doors a lot in 2016.
I'm sure.
I can tell you that.
I'm sure.
I mean, people just had just this horrible opinion of Hillary Clinton, which was clearly not true, but clearly media driven. In my opinion.
Sure.
Anyway.
Well,
and then in 2020 with pandemic, I called voters, I texted voters. I did so in the midterms as well. And, it was really cool just talking to people, Of
Yes.
course, they give you a list. So these are probably likely voters.
Right.
So I'm not talking to people. I'm not knocking on doors. And there's no way I can knock on doors here because it's slower Delaware and everybody's voting Democratic anyway. So
Right. I couldn't agree more with you on the idea that it's emotional, right?
yeah.
I mean, the research bears that out. We know that even when people think they have purchased a car, a home, or made some other major life decision rationally, and that's the driving force, there may have been some of that involved, but the real leverage was emotional. And I've got a really quick story for you on that. I was a life and health insurance salesman when I just turned 21. In fact, I was out in the field doing training like 2 days before my 21st birthday, just waiting on the clock to tick so I could officially have my license, right? And one thing that I was taught early on about sales was that decisions are made emotionally. Now, having not yet experienced much life or really had any money to speak of, I didn't own a home. I made money. I spent money, savings, investment at age. I didn't even comprehend any of that. And this is in 1986. So when I'm going out and presenting somebody a long-term facility policy, for example, that was going to be $2,700, $3,000 annually. I didn't even have $3,000 to my name, and so I just couldn't comprehend charging. So here's the deal. I scared myself by how easy it was to manipulate people's emotions, right? I found out I was very good at that, but for that reason, I failed in the insurance industry. And it's because since I didn't yet understand how I would actually be doing somebody a favor by selling them a Medicare supplement or a long-term. My brain hadn't yet wrapped around how you're doing something for them, right? You're not doing something to them. You're actually legitimately doing something for them. I would go in and become a professional visitor, right? I knew I could very easily influence these people emotionally and get them to buy that $3,000 policy. I knew I could. But if at that time and at that age, it felt wrong to me. I felt like it was almost like I was robbing a bank, right? So what I would do, we had a cancer policy, and I think at that time it was sold by Pioneer Life out of Rockford, Illinois. And it was $100 a year premium, and it's one of those policies that just pays some additional expenses, in addition for cancer only. So it's very cheap, $100 a year. And I think the commission on that was 50%. So you'd make $50 on each one of those. I sold those things like they were cotton candy. Why? Because I felt, gosh, it's just $100, and look, it takes care of some things that their insurance wouldn't otherwise do. So I sold the hell out of those. It's funny. The first year, I was the rookie of the year on number of policies sold, right?
Yeah.
But I was at the very bottom of the list in terms of income produced because I was only selling $100 policies. So I was in conflict with myself, but I came out of that understanding something very clearly. That number one, it's easy to influence people emotionally. It's simple to do. And that when you do it, you can very rapidly get somebody eating out of your hand and bypass their whole prefrontal cortex processing and have them responding from that limbic brain and basically doing things that defy logic, if that's what you want to do. And Donald Trump is the kind of person who, as an insurance salesman, would not only have sold them that policy that they could benefit from, but he would have illegally sold them two of them, right? Just because he knew that he could get the commission in the short term, that it would get kicked back and they'd have to refund their money, but he could already have invested the commission from the second one and tie it up. That's the mentality of Donald Trump. He does not have that ethical and moral sense.
No, he has no ethical or moral compass. I mean, the man is a psychopath.
Absolutely.
Psychopath.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so many stories that I have read about. Did you ever hear about the time when he bought a racehorse? Did you ever hear that story?
No.
Okay. So this was before he ran for president. Apparently he wanted to have a racehorse. So he goes and he agrees to buy this racehorse from somebody. That the story's in the Washington Post. If you have a subscription to it, you can look it up. So he goes and he buys this racehorse from this dealer, and I think it was for like $125,000. And of course, he renames the horse Donald J. Trump.
Oh,
Shocker.
Yeah. Right.
And then, so this horse, I guess it was an upcoming race, but the horse wasn't feeling well. And the trainer told Trump, like, we need to let this horse rest. We can't let it train. And then Trump insisted upon forcing this horse to train. Well, the horse collapsed, lost its two front hooves. And then, of course, in typical Donald Trump form, he hadn't paid for the horse yet. So he refused to pay the owner of the horse.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's actually, if you look it up in the Washington Post, it's there.
I will look that up.
Yeah. He's a sociopath. He's a psychopath. and that's the reason, you know, thousands and thousands of Americans died from COVID
Oh, my
because this
God, yes.
man was never going to help Americans.
No, he just does not have the capacity or the capability to feel emotionally the kinds of things that someone who could respond to a national crisis or a pandemic and the people was affecting in a way that a good leader could. And that's the scary thing about the possibility of a second term.
I can't even fathom it.
Right.
I don't know.
See,
I
the
mean,
idea, I think so many Republicans, and here was the big mistake, so many Republicans that I have talked to have been long in hopes that he would change aspects of his behavior. So what they don't understand is that Donald Trump is not capable
no,
of changing his behavior.
psychologically incapable of
Right,
change.
right. So they start from a premise that isn't even a possibility, right? With Donald Trump, you get exactly what you get. And if you got it in 2016, that's what you are going to get in 2025 and beyond. Until he expires, he is who he is.
Yeah.
Right? You're right. You know,
But but you gotta like, what drives me bananas today or every day is, that the stories about Biden's age, and Trump's out there just saying crazy shit, and they never, like, the press never brings it up. Like,
right.
what?
Well,
Like,
one thing I talk about, Andrea, that obviously it's not PC or I guess whoever officially sets that precedent, I've yet to discover, but it's something that most people probably don't think is appropriate to talk about, and maybe it's just out of fear. But let's be realistic about Donald Trump's life expectancy at this point. He's 78 years old. He's a man who has never had any type of exercise regimen. He's a man who has historically eaten fast food and just shit as his diet. He's a man who has constantly had himself in stressful situations. And that's the thing. A lot of people think, well, no, he doesn't feel any stress because he's a sociopath. He's a psychopath.
no, he's
He can
totally
feel
feeling
fear.
stressed. No, he's
Absolutely.
totally feeling stressed.
So if you were an insurance underwriter looking at
Oh,
Donald Trump, right, and he was wanting to buy life insurance, it just wouldn't be feasible for most people because he's such a poor candidate for. So I don't think that he's going to be with us much longer. The problem is with somebody like Donald Trump, in terms of how the nation feels about him, if he's here another month, that's probably too long because of the damage that he has done to this country, and one could argue to the world because of his involvement with, for example, Putin, who right now is waging war in Ukraine because he would like to go beyond Ukraine and into countries like Poland, for example, and do the same thing there. So Donald Trump has exacerbated the bad behavior, I feel, of other bad leaders around the world. There's been this synergistic effect between Putin and Donald Trump that's been bad for Ukraine. It's been bad for the United States. It could shortly be bad for Poland and other European countries. One last thing, because I know you probably need to get going. I want to circle back around to Donald Trump at Butler and just simply ask you this question. In your experience as an ER physician, is there a significant difference between the healing time of a 78-year-old human being and, say, a 35-year-old human.
100%. Yeah. I mean, huge, huge.
Right.
I
I'm
mean,
58. I mean, I know at 58, I don't heal like I did when I was 30.
yeah. I mean, the whole thing that I'm a fast healer was ridiculous. I mean, it was a nick.
Right.
It was
Right.
a nick. I mean, I've cut myself shaving.
Yes.
Worse than that. I mean,
I had this discussion with somebody last week, and I'm not sure if it's actually in an episode or if this was something we were talking about offline before we recorded, but it was another male, and we were both talking about the experience that we've had nicking our ear, shaving hair off the back of our ears, and how even just a razor cut sometimes will take a week or more to heal. You've got the little scabbing there, and that's just a nick. So if you buy into the 2-centimeter bullshit story,
there is no 2-centimeter anything.
No, never was. That's my contention. There never was. It's bullshit.
No,
you were not shot.
Ridiculous. I mean, you can look at the photos from the initial injury and see that it wasn't 2 centimeters.
Right.
I mean, like, doctors know what 2 centimeters look like.
Right.
That wasn't 2 centimeters.
And let me ask you one final question, because I wrote about this yesterday. And of course, it was just this hypothesis that I was just airing out in this post that I made. I hadn't done any research on it to look at the statistics that might be out there, but just anecdotally, in your experience, what percentage, roughly, of men 78 and older would be on a blood thinner?
Oh, well, gosh. I don't know off the top of my head, but I imagine, like, a few. I mean,
sure.
When you have, like, conditions like atrial fibrillation, which is super common,
right?
That would require a blood thinner if you've had a stroke, or, not always, that they won't always put you on a blood thinner if you've had an MI, but I mean, I would say I wouldn't know the percentage, but
right.
There's probably plenty.
Yeah,
there.
That's my feeling, that whatever the percentage, it would be statistically relevant in terms of what percentage it was. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. And the reason I ask you that is because one of the comebacks that I get from MAGA folks, right?
Oh, that he's on a blood thinner?
Well, no. Actually, to the contrary, they tell me, well, look at the blood. If you say it was just a nick, I'll say, well, look at the blood. Well, two things there. One, ears bleed easily, right? We both know that. But also, if it were true that he happened to be on something like Coumadin, then a mere scratch could cause his ear to bleed in what we were able to see while he was on stage. I mean, am I right in that?
No, yes, definitely.
So I think there are many unanswered questions, and I think
so
because
of
who he is, again, I say it's only a big deal in the sense that he's running for president, that he has been president, that he's the most documented presidential liar in history. And so I think when he is making a statement of fact about something that took place in an assassination attempt, I don't think we should be accepting generalized terms such as "I was shot." We need a definitive answer from a definitive entity or agency that says, here's what we've determined, here's how and why we determined that, and it pretty much excludes any other possibility. We need that kind of stuff about somebody as dangerous as Trump.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to get it, though.
No, we're not. And I think
we're never going to get it.
I think that's where I feel this I feel so compelled to keep it alive because you are right. We're not going to get it. We aren't.
Yeah.
Therefore, the only leverage then we have out of that particular lie is to keep highlighting the inconsistencies, right? To keep that in front, because as you stated earlier, people have a tendency to forget the really bad things or to forget the things that on the surface might seem trivial. And many people have attempted to make that argument that this, my insistence that it wasn't an intact bullet, who cares? Well, I care because
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
just
like
another
we
example.
should know, like there was an actual assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. We still don't know about the security failures. We still don't know what actually hit him because it wasn't a bullet.
Right.
We still don't know. I mean, we just don't know, like we don't know any information. I mean,
Well,
and
Andrea,
and a guy died.
right. Sadly. And
Yeah.
I think I want to end on that. In no way, shape, or form do I want to diminish the deaths of either of the people. I'm sure there's more to the story of Mr. Cook, who was the assassin, I guess, as the story goes.
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish the fact that two people died. That's tragic. My position is not that there was a staged assassination attempt. I'm looking at one small segment of this that Donald Trump has been using as political leverage. So, yeah, I'm lucky mine haven't marked yet. I have 4 of them
these
around
are
here.
mine.
Cool.
They just came
I'm
up.
like, dog people are good people, right? Well, Andrea, listen, I am so thankful and grateful for you agreeing to come on and
Well, this was great fun. I've never
yeah.
done anything like this before.
And I think my original message to you, I think I said, look, let's just get on and shoot the shit. You seem like somebody that it would be fun to talk to. And the fact that you are a physician, there are a lot of things that are relevant and connect with your medical expertise. So let's do this and it'll be fun. And I can say from my end, it's been great fun.
Yes, and from my end too.
All right. Well, listen,
My end too.
I will let you get to your puppies. Maybe
Okay.
we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
I
you.
will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.